Hello, in this video I want to talk a little bit about bridge abutments, particularly the toe of the abutments. You can see my model here. I have a pretty basic site, vertical banks on one side, nice slope on the other side. But in both cases, what I want to talk about is the placement of the bottom of the abutment and what to look for. When placing the top of the abutment, there's other considerations, but in this video I just want to talk about the toe. You can see here the toe is the bottom edge closest to the waterway. Okay, so the toe would be here in this abutment, and the abutment on the other side um, will be right here. Okay, and what I have drawn here is a pretty simple spread footer cast in place. This would be the same thing. The toe is the same place regardless if it's a cast in place or you can hear our precast. Our precast, if I bring this over and set that here, the toe in this particular case would be right here. That's not the toe, that's not the toe. The toe is right here, the very bottom of the abutment. So same thing, if we're using the smaller package, bring this over, our toe is right here. And in the last example I have over here, our smallest abutment, our toe would be right here now. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about where to put the bottom of the abutment or how to protect that toe. And this is pretty general stuff. You may want to consult a soils engineer or a hydraulic engineer to get more details about your specific site. But I just want to let you know how I try to place abutments whenever we're designing and building and putting these bridges together. You basically want this toe protected by 2 foot of soil or rock or anything. You want it protected by 2 foot of something substantial to daylight. Okay, and how I typically draw that is like this. Okay, it's a diagonal 2 foot. So what I'm going to do is go out 45 degrees. Okay, that's where we want to be. So that measurement here should be 2 foot exactly. So we have 2 foot there. Okay. Just to help you see this, I will make this into just like a little square here. That way you can kind of see what this looks like. I'll color this yellow. That way you can see this is just a tool that I use. The red is the abutment, the blue obviously is the bridge. In this particular case, you can see that our abutment is not protected by 2 foot of soil. So in this particular case, we would need to move our abutment back just a little bit right there in order for that to be considered a good placement for that abutment. Alternatively, let's say we absolutely needed it right there. We for whatever reason, we need the abutment sitting right there. Well, there's a few different things we can do. Obviously, the easiest is take our abutment and just move it down a little bit. Okay, that means the top of our abutment will need to go up just a little bit. So we just have a slightly deeper abutment. If you want to know what the measurements are in this particular case, this abutment is 2 foot by 2 foot. Okay, that's a pretty typical abutment. But in this scenario, if we're at that slope, we would need to move this up. Now we're 2 foot 2 inches. So really, we're not talking a lot of extra concrete there. But if we want to move the abutment a little bit closer, let's say we wanted it over here, obviously we'll just need to make the abutment a little bit deeper. And now they'll need to go up to there. Okay. So the closer we get, the deeper our abutment needs to be. The alternative, let me take a few steps back. Let's say we absolutely didn't want to increase the abutment depth. Let's say we're using our precast blocks and we have a predefined measurement and we really don't want to dig any deeper. What we can do is, since we're only talking a small distance here, heck, in this particular case, we're only talking, That's less than 2 inches there. What we could do is just fill that up and protect it with some riprap. So what that would look like is we would just take some riprap from the very top here and just cover the soil, cover that point up by a few inches, and let's do something like that. And that would be protected with soil. So now our banks would look kind of like that. Now that would work. Um, that's a perfectly acceptable abutment. Obviously, you want to be careful with your slope and make sure whatever you put here doesn't just get washed down and get in the waterway. But that's a pretty simple way of doing it as well. Okay, is slightly modifying your banks. Let me change the abutment a little bit. Okay, I'm going to take a few steps back here and let's put our abutment back the way it was. Now let's say our abutment is a lot steeper. Let's say it actually looks more like, oh, come on. Let's say our button looks more like this. Okay, not our button, but our banks. Now let's say you wanted to put the abutment, the very edge of it, right here. The same general principle. So let's say our controlling factor is we absolutely want this abutment right here. Okay, let's say for whatever reason we want it. Let's even bring it a little closer. Let's say we wanted it right there at that edge. Okay, so we would just need to push the button down right there. Okay, that's all we need to do, and then build our abutment taller, just like that. Okay, that's pretty simple. And when you start getting, obviously that's a good slope right there. When you start getting into these banks on this side, you can see that it's going to be the same general principle, but you want to make sure you have enough soil there, good soil, that it doesn't just topple over. Especially when you start excavating this trench here for this abutment, it's going to make this a bit unstable here. So in this particular case, you really want to be really as far out as possible, or alternatively, you want to go as deep as possible. If we're getting real close to this bank, um, we typically want to do the same thing where we're protecting that toe with 2 foot, but we want that below the waterway now. We want this, about 1.5 foot below the waterway, that toe. That way we don't have so much of a concern with that water undermining this abutment. And that's our biggest concern, is when this water flows through here, we don't want this thing churning up. Let's move this over here. So you can imagine if we had it here at the very edge, when the water flows through here, it's going to just churn up that abutment here, and eventually this abutment's just going to want to topple. It's just going to want to fall right in. It's going to become unstable for that toe. The toe's not going to be supported, and the whole thing will just topple over. Um, um, so on this side, same thing. We don't want that abutment to topple over. Let me build this a little bit taller. So yeah, that does become a bit tall, but sometimes if you can't push your abutment back, you need to go pretty deep. And we can do the same thing here with our precast, but our concern is with the abutments toppling over back this way. I'm not so much concerned about the abutments going this way. We are very concerned about the abutments falling in this way, and that's because water might start undermining this area right over that toe, cutting that toe. And that's all there really is to it. As always, you should consult a civil engineer or a structural engineer or a hydraulic engineer or all of them and get their opinion, see what they recommend. What I do is based on decent soil, 1500 PSF, no large alluvial clays or anything that needs to be excavated. Actually, sometimes whenever we do dig this, even when we're uh, protecting our abutment properly. Let's move this all the way back in here. So we got this proper. Um, if we start digging this and we start finding that there's a lot of just really poor soils underneath the abutment, we will over excavate and fill that in with some good road base or gravel. That way, we don't worry about that abutment toppling over. Not because of the water, but because of poor soils. If you had a large clay deposit here, this thing could start moving on that clay as well. Um, we have problems. But you really don't know that until you start excavating, or if you want to get a soils report, and they'll drill down and tell you what that soil looks like. But even then, the soils engineer is going to recommend that they be on site to verify soil conditions. And so when you start digging, you may have to over excavate a little bit. It doesn't happen too terribly often. Maybe 20 or 30% of the time we do have to over excavate, maybe a foot or so, remove some of that bad soil, and then fill this area up here with gravel. That's all. Thanks.